work of arts.
The gallery was silent, save for the faint hum of air conditioning and the occasional shuffle of overpriced designer shoes against polished concrete. Clara stood with her arms crossed, glaring at the two paintings before her like they had personally offended her. On the left, a single blue dot in the center of a white canvas eclipsed the plaque read, $50 million. On the right, a jagged red line slashing across a gray background. Convergence. Another $50 million. She exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to laugh. A dot and a line, $100 million of genius. The man next to her, black turtleneck, wire-rimmed glasses, and an air of unbearable self-satisfaction, turned slightly, just enough to let her know he had heard but wouldn't dignify her with a response. She had encountered his type before. He probably used words like liminal space unironically. She didn't belong here, and she knew it. She wasn't an artist or a collector. She was a failed writer, or at least, that's how it felt. It had been months, years even, since she had written anything that mattered. The blank page had become her enemy, a vast white abyss that swallowed every idea before it could take shape. The first line was supposed to be the easy part, but that was the problem. She couldn't even begin. So she wandered places like this, hoping something, anything would jolt her out of it. But if inspiration was anywhere in this room, it was suffocating under a mountain of performative reverence. She turned back to the paintings. And then, something strange happened. The blue dot in eclipse darkened, shifting from paint to something impossibly deep, like a pinhole into another world. The red line in convergence trembled, stretching, reaching. She blinked, but the illusion remained. A voice, clear and cold, spoke directly in her mind. Pick one. A chill crawled up her spine. She glanced around, but the gallery continued as if nothing was happening. Champagne flutes clinked. Fake intellectual murmurs filled the air. No one else seemed to notice that reality itself had just folded in on itself right in front of her. She turned back to the paintings. The blue dot pulsed. The longer she stared, the more it looked less like paint and more like an abyss, a void, peaceful, weightless nothingness, a world where she didn't have to try anymore. Didn't have to fail, didn't have to wrestle with the gnawing fear that she was mediocre, that the stories inside her weren't worth telling. She could step inside, disappear. It would be easy. Then there was the red line. It vibrated with energy, erratic, imperfect, alive. It was the opposite of the void. It was struggle, passion, creation. It was the refusal to fade into the background. It wasn't safe, but it was real. Clara took a slow step forward, her heart hammering. She reached toward the red line, and something grabbed her wrist. She gasped, twisting around. The man in the turtleneck was staring at her now, his grip cool and firm. His expression didn't change, but his eyes burned with quiet warning. "Don't," he said simply. She yanked her arm back. "What the hell?" But he wasn't looking at her anymore. Instead, he turned to Eclipse, the blue dot, and nodded. Just the subtlest inclination of his head. The void responded. It expanded. A faint wind stirred through the gallery, though nothing in the room moved. The paintings, the people, the walls, unchanged. And yet she felt it. A pressure, a presence, something. Her stomach twisted. She turned back to convergence. The red line was still there, still buzzing like a raw nerve exposed to the world. But now, she realized, no one else was even looking at it. No one ever chose the red line. Clara swallowed hard. The blue was easy. The red was hard. The blue was safe. The red was real. The blue was the path taken by the man in the turtleneck, and everyone like him. The collectors, the critics, the ones who built their lives inside echo chambers of privilege and detachment. It was acceptance into their world, a world where struggle was conceptual, never experienced. The red was for those who carved their own way, the ones who fell and bled and failed and kept going anyway. her hands curled into fists. And then, with a smirk, she turned away from both paintings. The man's brow furrowed. Wait. But Clara was already walking, past the champagne trays, past the murmuring crowd, past the soulless walls of an art world that had long stopped meaning anything. She pushed through the heavy gallery doors and stepped outside. The city greeted her with a rush of cold air and movement. Taxis honked. Strangers hurried past. Life, real, messy, uncurated, unfolded around her. And then, she saw it. A red scarf, caught in the wind, twisting through the air before landing at the feet of a child on the sidewalk. He picked it up, laughing, wrapping it around himself as he ran to catch up with his mother. She was struck by the way it moved, without permission, without expectation. The energy, the sheer unruliness of it. A single, brilliant streak of red cutting through a dull winter skyline. It wasn't framed, it wasn't signed, it wasn't waiting for approval. It just was. Unscripted, fleeting, unconcerned with whether anyone thought it was worthy. For so long, she had searched for meaning in rooms that sterilized it, in spaces where life was dissected, theorized, bought and sold, but never felt. But meaning wasn't something to be studied or owned. It was something to be lived. Clara exhaled. She smiled. And as the child ran ahead, the red scarf twisting and unfurling behind him, she saw it for what it was. It was her first line. Wild, untamed, full of motion. This time, she wouldn't try to pin it down. She would let it run, let it breathe, let it take her somewhere. Somewhere she had never been before.